Thank you for the music, Linda. Thank you, Brianna, Justin, for running the show. And thanks, everyone, for being here today. Thank you. Luke 22. Last week we talked about the denial of Peter. His 3 denials of Jesus. While that was going on, we had the trials of Jesus perpetrating the greatest injustice to the most innocent man ever to walk the face of the earth. Now, I can't just gloss over that and run right through these trials because the details here are very, very important. We need to understand who God is. God is justice. He is truth. And yet He is merciful and loving, slow to anger. That's who He is. All of that combined into one. And so God, having established the nation Israel in a world that is broken, as that song had said at the very beginning. We're living in a broken world. Sin abounds. God designed a specific protection for all people, and it's called a legal system. God gave forth His law. And that law is to protect, right? That's its main goal, is for our benefit, so we don't kill one another, okay? That's really what it comes down to. And so, if God had given, and we're going to look at what He had given Israel, He'd given them a whole legal system, how to be fair, to protect the innocent, and provide justice. But then God steps out of heaven, becomes a man, goes under that same system, and yet has no protection from the legal authorities during that time, the religious leaders. Everything they did was illegal. Everything. I didn't realize the extent of how railroaded Jesus was through these trials. It is horrific. Horrific. And they had the greatest legal system the world has ever known. We think ours is good, somewhat good, as far as man goes, right? But they had a great system which hammered justice, but provided mercy in bucket loads. And you're going to see that. We're going to look at the justice system to understand what Christ is going through in the nighttime. So what we're going to find is that Jesus goes through 6 different trials from the time of 1 o'clock until 9 o'clock in the morning. The first one is going to be, he's going to go before Annas, the high priest. He's actually the older, retired high priest. But they brought him to him because they know he would come up with a charge because he's the head of the whole temple system. He's the godfather, okay, of the money changers and making profits off of everyone that comes in to sacrifice. They've got to buy their specified sheep. Remember that? That's why Jesus tore into the temple, overturning the tables, because he was profiting along with all his henchmen. So they're going to take him before Annas first. And then secondly, he's going to go before Caiaphas. He is the current high priest. But he's also the son-in-law. It's kept in the family of Annas. By the way, Annas had 5 different sons who were high priests at different times. And then he's the new high priest, the son-in-law. Okay? And then finally, at daybreak, they're going to have a mock trial to make it all look legitimate. Okay? So this is going to happen from 2 to 3 a.m., 3 to 5 a.m., and then when the morning hits, 5 o'clock. Then he's going to go from there to Pilate. They have to take him to Pilate because Rome is the only one that has the power of execution, capital punishment. The Jews are not allowed to kill anyone. They have to have Rome's approval. So they've got to come up with some idea to say Jesus is a threat to the Roman Empire. So they're going to take him to Pilate. Then Pilate's going to send him to Herod, who is not Jewish. He is hated by the Jews, but he is over the city of Jerusalem in that area. And then he's going to go back to Pilate. And this is going to lead from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I'm sorry, 6 to 9. 6 to 9, and by 9 o'clock, Christ will be crucified at 9 a.m., put on the cross, and he'll be there till 3 a.m., where he gives up his spirit. 6 hours on the cross.
3 p.m.
Oh, thank you. 3 p.m. 3 p.m. So 6 hours. At noon, sky goes dark. From noon to 3, black. Nobody can see what's going on. That's when Christ receives the ultimate terror of receiving the sins of the world poured on him. He gives up his spirit of his own accord, and then is buried after that. Right away. Right away. And keep in mind, this is the eve of Passover and Passover Day. Okay? And at 3 o'clock is when all the sheep are being brought into Jerusalem, into the temple to be sacrificed for every family in the land. So we're talking about millions of sacrifices going on, thousands and thousands. But Christ is dying at the time because he's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. This is God's schedule, his timing, everything. And Jesus said, it is the hour of darkness. And so, like a lamb before the shears is silent, he goes forth. So we have these trials that he's going to endure. In Luke, where we're at, Luke in verses 63 to 71 give an account of this right here. Okay? He does not talk about these 2 other trials, but we can find these 2 other trials in Matthew and in the book of John. And Mark talks about them as well. We got 4 different witnesses testifying to Christ and what he endured. But we're going to look at these to get the full realm of what transpired that night. But before we do that, we have to look at the greatest constructed justice system in history. that God had given. God believed in the sanctity of life, protecting the innocent. Truth mattered more than anything else. To get to the bottom, to find the truth, is pure justice, right? And then to show mercy as well. And really, this matters to us as Christians. I mean, this is part of who we are. We are part of a movement in world's history that has fought against oppression, fought against slavery, even in our country here. It was people raising voices, the abolitionists, that stopped slavery. Injustices through history, Christians have been there following God's word. Because we've been told, according to Micah 6:8, if you remember these verses, this is great. What is it to serve God? It's to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. You know that verse? That's a famous one. So with us, we walk in truth, we treat people fairly, we display mercy when someone asks for forgiveness, and we walk humbly with our God. Now God gave Israel their legal system, and it begins as the Jews are entering into the promised land. And we find this account in the book of Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy 16, chapter 16, verses 18 and 20 say this: "Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the innocent. Follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you." God is a great God. He's told them, I want you to be fair. And the way I want you to do this now is to set up a legal system You didn't know you were going to legal school today, did you? We're going to get a little bit in depth with this. It's like Judge Watton and Judge Judy have come home here, right? So you have all of these towns. In a town in this is considered 120 families or more. You would have 23 elders that were going to be the judge and jury for every case, whether it's criminal or civil, brought to them. And it's an odd number for a, okay, right? We have 9 in our Supreme Court, but 23 elders. And so all these towns would have this. If it was less than 120 families, they would appoint 3 to 7 judges for that area. But their local courthouses were the synagogues, right? Because with God, He was intertwined in their legal system. The spiritual was the same as the legal system. And so you have all these different synagogues spread over Israel. But then in Jerusalem, this is the high court. This is like the Supreme Court. And their judges are called the Sanhedrin. Now we've heard this word a few times already in the book of Luke. The Sanhedrin are made up of scribes, Pharisees, elders, and chief priests. So there's 23 of each, and there's a total, counting the high priest, of 70. And the word Sanhedrin means sitting in. They're sitting in judgment. So the Sanhedrin members have been following Jesus and constantly railing against him all the time. That's your Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes. They're all a part of this cabal. Okay, they're supposed to be the most judicial people, and Jesus has called them out many times, saying they are empty graves full of dead men's bones, sending people to hell. Okay? So the Sanhedrin, they were supposed to be the high court, so if someone didn't like the decision here, they could appeal to Jerusalem. Now Jesus is dealing with them right now. And actually this has been a good system judicially. It's the same system that came back from Moses. And Jesus even said that. He's saying, these people sit in the seat of Moses. You need to listen to them. But don't do as they do. Remember that? Okay, what they say is correct in regard to the law, but their lives deny it by their lifestyle, by their own thieving and everything else. So, that's the Sanhedrin, the high court. Now, on top of that, every court proceeding has three main functions. They are to have a public trial in order to be fair, right? That means there's no clandestine courts, there's no judgments hidden from the people, and no decisions in hiding. I mean, wouldn't you be appalled if our courts were holding night sessions with no one allowed to come in? Would you feel like you were getting justice? No, not at all. But the judges were always exposed to the scrutiny of the populace. Okay? So a public trial. Secondly, there's always going to be a defense for the accused. We have that in our legal system. We have to provide a defense attorney for anyone. So whoever's being accused of something, you have the right to tell forth your side of the story and give your defense. Thirdly, a confirmation of guilt has to be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay? So you don't have a case if you have one witness. You've got to have 2 or 3 people witness it. Not only that, there was a law against self-incrimination. Even if you confessed and there weren't other witnesses with you, you could not be prosecuted. I mean, we have that here in America as well. No self-incrimination. So, this is a good legal standard right there, right? It's a good legal standard, and we somewhat have that in our society. But you're going to see every one of these has been nullified by the Sanhedrin over this nighttime. Well, number one, nighttime trial. That's going against the first one right away. Now, regarding witnesses, this part here, I wish we had this in America. We don't. But if you were found to be a false witness, you suffered the same punishment as the guilty. So if you came out in defense of someone, if what you were saying is false, you along with them will be held guilty. And if it's a capital case, or one that has a capital punishment of death, if you lied, you died. When the guilty criminal died. Now, are people going to think twice about telling the truth? Huh? And God had a lot to say about that. Deuteronomy 19, chapter 19, in verse 16, says, if a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse someone of a crime, the two people involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priests and the judges who are in office at the time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against a fellow Israelite, then do to the false witness as that witness intended to do to the other party. That's what God is saying there. You're going to hold that person giving false witness. If I remember correctly, I think that's in the 10 Commandments, right? That's one of the commandments. Do not give false witness. Don't lie. And it goes on to say, you must purge the evil from among you. It's like they're going to reveal themselves through telling a lie. And the result, the rest of the people will hear of this and be afraid, and never again will such an evil thing be done among you. They're being made an example of. So one witness is not enough to convict anyone accused of a crime. It must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay? Now the great thing about the Gospels, we got 4 of them. In order to testify about Christ, there has to be 2 or 3 witnesses. We have 4 counts. It's like God threw in an extra one, right? To testify to the truth of Christ. That's just a side note. But anyway, now the witnesses who are making accusations against against the accused one, if the accused is found guilty of a crime and it's capital punishment, and they take him out to stone him, that's the way they did it. They stoned people back in that day. But the one who made the first accusation, that first witness, they had to throw the first rock. Did you know this? I did not know this. So if I said you did something, you killed somebody else, and it went through trial, and you're found guilty, I have to throw that first stone. Thus, the reason, this makes sense now, they did not accept the testimony of a woman or a child. It was for that reason. They didn't think that a woman would have courage to throw that first stone. That's the reason why. I did not know that. Well, you probably have courage to throw that first stone, but they didn't want women to participate in that gruesome thing happening. Now, that makes sense now when you hear about Jesus with the woman caught in adultery. and there's this crowd of people with stones in their hands, and Jesus says, "You who are without sin, cast the first stone." Now, who would be throwing that first stone? The witness. The one that accused this woman of adultery. Right? And so you hear all the stones start dropping because there was no witnesses. No witnesses coming forward. Second of all, where was the man? It takes two for adultery, right? That's what always threw me on this. That was all a shill. That was all a sham that they were pushing in front of Christ to trip him up. But that's why he had called for the first accuser to come forward. So that makes sense. So it's also, if you are the one who witnessed and you're giving a testimony against someone, now you have to go out and stone them. Wouldn't that have a great weight on your conscience? Right? You would think twice about it. I mean, I lied about this. Now I'm guilty of killing this person. It's like added weight on top of that witness. I mean, we don't have this in America, this system. But it worked for them. Now, the system is pretty remarkable because it reveals justice and really displays mercy to a great extent. Because you would have, again, three steps to a trial. We haven't even got to the trials of Jesus. We're going to look at the judicial system, because when you start going through the trial, you're going to say, wrong, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. Everything has been denied Christ in his defense. But you have the day of the trial, a second day of contemplation, and on the third day, the sentencing or the execution of the sentence. So here, the day of the trial, they're gonna say he's guilty or innocent. Then this next day, so it's a 3-day event. And what? They railroaded Christ to the cross in a matter of hours. You see the sin of that right away. But you have a day of trial and then a day of contemplation where the judges would fast and mull over in their mind the details of the outcome. And then the third day would be the day of execution. And there's so much mercy built into this to make sure that they get to the truth. Because this first day, the day of the trial, they would have the accused person come in for an appearance, and they had all the accusations that were made clear beforehand. They would have depositions beforehand where people would go through and say exactly that this person committed this crime on this month, this year, this date, this time, at this location, with all the circumstances with it. And they'd get all these witness testimony combined. So they'd have that going into it. Then, oh my gosh. This is what they would say at the trial. Great responsibility rests on you as a witness. Speak forth without conjectures nor words based on public rumor, we ask you. If you cause the condemnation of a person unjustly accused, his blood and the blood of all the posterity of that person of whom you will have deprived the earth will fall upon you. God will demand of you an account as he has demanded of Cain an account for the blood of Abel. Now speak. So if you're a witness, I mean, you're going into this, I've got to give the truth. So they'd have an examination of the proofs. The judges then would start to speak. The judges who thought the person were innocent would speak out and give their reasoning. The other judges who thought they should be condemned would speak forth and give their side of the story. So you'd have an equal discussion at this point. So after an examination of the proofs, they'd bring in the accused person. They would have him speak in his defense. And of course, there's no self-incrimination. When he was done, this discussion was finished, and one judge would officiate and overview the whole case, and then they would have to vote. So you have 23 judges. This is in the regular court. We're talking about 70 at this time, at the night of Christ's trial. But in normal trial, there would be 23 who would have to vote at the end of this trial. If 11 of them say he's innocent, he's allowed to go free. He can walk. 11 of the 23. So it's below half, right? But in order for a conviction, there has to be 13. 13 to 23 for the conviction. And when they took a vote, they started with the youngest member and worked up to the oldest. You know why that is? So they would not be swayed. The younger guys wouldn't be swayed by the words of the older people. They wanted justice for them to think freely. You're not going to see any of this in Jesus' trials. Nothing. Nothing. We're not done yet. So if they take the vote, if convicted, the judge postpones the sentencing of the execution till 2 days later. So they reflect on the case the next day, and then on the third day they return to their judgment seats, and they ask everyone, have you changed your mind? They go through to each judge, have you changed your decision? And here's the thing. If some of the people who had first acquitted them of the crime, if they were part of that 11 that said he was innocent, they're not able to change their mind to say he's guilty now. It only works the other way. Only those who say that condemned him at first can stand with condemnation or drop it. That's a huge amount of mercy right there, right? But not only that, you have these judges seated in the synagogue. They called forth 2 officials. Okay, if the person is condemned, if they've all voted, they've made that, once again, another vote that they all convict that criminal, they call in 2 officials. One official will stand at the entrance holding a flag, and the other official will go with the prisoner to follow the prisoner and the guards to the place of execution, continually looking back at that doorway to see if the flag is raised. Because during this time, if anyone comes forth with more information, they can come and tell them and flag the prisoner to come back. Not only that, the prisoner himself, if he thinks of something else, he can say, I need to go back and talk. They can take him back at least 5 times. In the procession of the criminal, as it's leaving, advances very slowly, preceded by a herald who in a loud voice, addressing the people, says, "This man," stating his name, "is led to punishment for such and such a crime. The witnesses who have sworn against him are this person and this person and this person. If anyone else has evidence in his favor, come forth quickly." And they said that all the way to the execution. For anybody to come forth. It's like, we want to make sure he is guilty and is receiving proper punishment. That's the extent. Did Jesus receive any of this? As you'll see, no. Nothing. And here's the thing, the Sanhedrin knew all this. They've operated this way since they were in local courts and worked their way up to the Sanhedrin. Their motto is, the Sanhedrin is to save, not destroy life. There's much more about the Sanhedrin. But anyway, we need to understand the Sanhedrin's hatred for Jesus. He's disturbed their money racketing. He's disturbed the society. He's disturbed theological teaching of the Pharisees. He's a threat, and he has to be dealt with. So they're going to railroad him through a trial. So turn with me to John 18. We haven't even got to the verses yet, but that's pretty important, isn't it? To know. And there's so little said about these trials, too. But in John 18 is the first one during Annas, where they brought him before Annas. And remember, in the courtyard, Peter is out there hiding in the shadows. And it's during this time that's taking place. Annas is on one side of the building. Caiaphas' house is on the other side of the courtyard. You remember that? So John 18. Verse 12. It says, "Then the detachments of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people." I mean, he'd made another comment about, look, we need to just kill off Jesus so we can save Israel. Otherwise, the Romans are going to come down on us. And then, of course, Simon Peter was in the courtyard with his first denial there. Verse 19. "Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. And Jesus said, I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. Now here's what's going on here. They're bringing the judge and jury is now becoming prosecutor and has dragged him in front of them without any witnesses. So they are committing the crime. It'd be like our Supreme Court taking someone, pulling them in, throwing accusations at them with no court case. It's appalling. So now, Annas himself, this retired high priest, who's probably in his 80s at this point, age-wise, he's fishing for a reason to accuse him. He's trying to get Jesus to speak forth to incriminate himself, which is illegal. And he's asking him, what do you teach? Who are your disciples? And Jesus plainly says, look, I've spoken openly. I always taught in the synagogues and in the temple. I've done it all publicly. Unlike what we're doing right now, is really what he's saying. What I have spoken, it is out there. I've spoken nothing in secret. Why are you questioning me? Question those who have heard what I said. In other words, bring in the witnesses. I don't see any witnesses. He's calling for proper legal procedure here. And I'm not going to incriminate myself. This is illegal. Where are your witnesses? Call them. And really, it's a severe indictment of Annas' proceedings. And while Jesus was saying that, one of the officers gave Jesus a blow and punched him in the face. And he says, is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. And Jesus, in verse 23, if I said something wrong, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? And then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Annas had no idea what to do at this point. It's like Jesus has just called him on everything. And Jesus is saying, look, no retaliation from Jesus at all. But he said, if I said something wrong, testify as to what is wrong. It's unlike Paul, Paul went through the same thing in the book of Acts, where he's brought before Ananias, another priest, high priest. And Paul didn't hold back like Jesus did. He spoke against the high priest, saying, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. Okay, that's Paul. But we're talking about Jesus here. The ultimate majestic Jesus standing before this fake trial. So we've got a trial at night, right? Trial not in public. It's in this guy's home, Annas' home, without witnesses. There's no accusation. They're fishing for something against him. And Annas had no authority at all. He was not the high priest. Even though there were high priests for life, just like we have justices for life, Supreme Court justices for life. They were high priests for life, but their authority, he had no authority. So that first trial, complete illegal in every way. And because Annas now was embarrassed, he was confused. He had nothing to bring against Jesus. He said, send him to Caiaphas. So off they take Christ across the courtyard over to Caiaphas' house. And during this time with Annas, Caiaphas was collecting all the Sanhedrin. He was looking for all 70 and trying to get them to come in to start issuing accusations against Christ. And you wonder how many of those 70 showed up. According to Mark 1:53 says, all were there. All were there. All 70 wanted to see him dead. They only need 23 for a quorum to make a judgment. But all 70 were there because they had to act fast before there was any public involvement, get it done. But they're breaching the law the whole time. But Jesus knows this. This is the hour of darkness. He's expecting it. It's God's plan for him to go to his death. So next week we'll continue on with Caiaphas. I didn't know there was this much to it. Who would? I mean, you watch the movie and it doesn't take very long, right? Not knowing any background. Oh, Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for introducing into this world fairness, a legal system, justice, righteousness, and also mercy and love. But thank you for introducing to us the greatest of all, Christ, who is impeccable, perfect, sinless, a lamb without stain. And he traded places with us. Father, here we are to remember that as we gather together as your children, as your people, to remember who you are and the great lengths he has gone for us. Father, may we show the world what mercy is, what grace is, what truth is, and what justice is. May we live that out in our life. Give us wisdom, insight, confidence, boldness to proclaim your word in this world. Thank you, Lord Jesus. In your name, amen.